So you're going to kidnap her? I asked Victor as he shared his plans with me. Not really, it would be just an act. For the first few hours, yes, she would be terrified, but when I proposed to her, she would jump right in my arms from happiness, he said while putting the ring back in his pocket. That's just wishful thinking. You know she's a slut and cheating on you, I said in a disgusted tone which was directed to Eddie. Watch your mouth, Peter. Just because you suspect her of cheating doesn't mean she is, so stop running your mouth mindlessly. He grabbed my collar in anger and said as he slammed me to the door. Noted, I said in a slow, frustrated voice and walked away without turning back. So as you have noticed that my name is Peter and my surname is Solace, it's more like a commitment because my parents never let me forget that the surname I'm carrying is more valuable than my existence. I met Victor the day I ran away from home. He offered me help and let me stay at his place. After that, I began seeing his girlfriend Eddie, who would often make her visits to his place and stay over. One day, I saw her sneakily talking to someone over the phone. I couldn't understand her conversation, but I knew that conniving little bitch was hiding something from him. And it wasn't the only time I saw her sneaking around behind Victor's back. Or maybe he knew and chose to ignore it. But I wasn't going to keep a blind eye on things, so I chose to tell him. But that idiot did not trust me and said there must be another good explanation for her hiding whatever she's hiding. Then all of a sudden, Victor told me that today he's going to propose to that wench, and you know the rest of the story. He was planning on giving her a little scare at first before popping the question. The next morning, I woke up only to find Victor wasn't home. I figure he must still be out since he planned to propose to Eddie last night. Regardless of how it went, the guy still hasn't returned home. But that's none of my business anymore, looking at how he did not trust me when I wanted him to. I went to the bathroom to freshen up when I heard the door clicking. "Hey man, is it you?" I asked loudly, but there was no reply. So I walked out of the bathroom, only to find Victor looking like a mess. He told me that Eddie is missing and he could not find her all night. Well, it was obvious he wasn't able to since I was the one who was executing his plan of kidnapping her, just wasn't a fan of his proposal. Don't worry too much. Maybe she just moved somewhere else. Didn't I tell you she was sneaking behind your back? As I said this, he glared at me with an angry look on his face. "I'm not in the mood, Peter. Shut it," he said while gritting his teeth. I shrugged and walked out because I wasn't going to put up with his crap any more than I already have. It must seem like I'm a selfish bastard who doesn't know how to be grateful, but trust me, I am so much more than that. What do you want from me? Please let me go, Peter. As soon as I walked into the room of my private beach house, I heard Eddie scream. "Not much, just for you to own up to your actions and accept the consequences," I said as I walked into the bed where she was tied up. "What the hell are you talking about?" she asked, making a weird expression on her face, which made me believe for a second that she was confused, but I know very well she was acting. "Oh, don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been trying to seduce me from the day we met, moaning so loudly at night, knowing I was in the next room, being in a slutty dress in the morning, trying to be so nice to me. Did you think I would let you end up with Victor after all this? On top of that, I know how you were sneaking around behind his back." I grabbed her face and said, "I never once tried to seduce you, and my sneaking around had nothing to do with you. It's not like I was cheating on him or something," she said, eyes full of anger and resentment toward me, which was kind of painful to watch. "Oh, I know that was about your love child that your ex-lover's raising, but still, Victor doesn't know that about you." "Does he now?" I laughed after saying this, and now the expression she had was something that made me feel delightful. "You think you are so clever. Trust me, the moment I get free from you, I will make you regret ever kidnapping me." She gritted her teeth and threatened me, which was quite amusing to watch, looking at how she was tied and helpless like a caged bird. We'll see about that. I exited the room and said that and head toward the kitchen. And that was when I felt someone hit me on the head with something. I turned and saw Victor holding a hockey stick in his hand, which had blood on it, before I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was on a chair with handcuffs on my hands. Victor and Eddie were sitting across staring at me, and police officers were asking questions about the whole kidnapping thing. I don't know how he found out about this, but I wasn't going to let that damned girl fool Victor anymore. You know she has a love child. Victor's expression changed as he heard. After giving me a long glare, he scoffed and said, I know about Ian. Eddie told me everything a week ago. The smirk on his face was pissing me off even more, and at that moment, officers came and told me it was time to go. You're going to regret this. I am telling you, she's a slut. She even tried to seduce me, Victor. Victor! I kept screaming as they dragged me to the car, while Victor and Eddie turned their faces away, refusing to spare me another glance.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
You know you deserve all these bad things that have been happening to you. I looked at Porter as he said this with dead eyes. What do you mean by that? I asked while clenching my fists that were ready to throw at him any time. I mean what I mean. You're ugly, and you deserve all the bad things that happen to you. He was still as calm as the wind, as if it did not even matter to him what he was saying could hurt my feelings. You're mean, I said, and ran away while crying, as he continued looking at me with the same cold, dead look in his eyes. I was in 3rd grade back then when I first noticed that Porter did not care if his actions or words hurt those around him. He did not smile much, and his responses were the bare minimum. But whenever he did smile, he still had the most charming smile among others, which was the reason I started to crush on him. It was one day during recess when I was walking back to the classroom. I saw Porter standing in front of a girl. She was skinny, with straight hair that came to the neck, and she was laughing goofily. That was when I saw her touching his hand, which he slapped away, and then he started slapping and beating her with the same cold, dead expression on his face. I don't know why he was doing that and what the girl did to piss him off, but I ran to call a teacher. When I came back to the teacher, he was still beating the girl, until the teacher had to pull him away and asked to stop beating that poor girl. He got suspended for a week due to his violent behavior, and I kept wondering why did he do that, and why he never looked as if he did something bad. It was as if it did not occur to him that it would hurt her, or she might not like the way he treated her. At that time, he seemed to me as an emotionless, violent monster. He came back to school after his suspension period ended, but he became even quieter and more self-reserved than he used to be before. Students started to avoid him, since they were all scared of him, including myself, and he didn't care either. Even if any of them tried to talk to him, he would simply just drive them away with his meanness. I still thought of him as charming as ever, and I still had my little crush on him, but I was too scared to show that to him or anyone else for that matter. Time passed just like this, and it was finally time for the result of our final exam. And during those times, Peter had already been suspended 3 times for violence, and he was on his last warning before being expelled. After that, he transferred schools. I did not hear about him until 2 years later, when one day, my mom talked to one of her friends about a playdate for us. The family had moved to the area 2 months ago, and Mom became friends with her during a spa session. Anyway, so Mom took me and my little brother Kirby to her friend's house while explaining to us during the entire car ride that we should behave and not do anything troublesome. Playdates were a weekly thing. Mom would often call any of her friends and schedule a playdate for us with their children, and then the parents would spend their day relaxing or something like that. As Mom walked into her house, her friend introduced us to her daughter, Cecilia, who was 2 years younger and around the same age as Kirby. but for some reason she looked rather familiar. I knew I had never met her in my entire life, but she still looked as if someone I may have known from somewhere. She told us that her stepson was sick and sleeping in his room. I was curious for a few minutes about how he might look, but then I got over it and started playing with Kirby and Cecilia. My mom and her friend went out for the day after informing us that Cecilia's father was in the living room watching TV, and if we needed anything, we could ask him. We were in the middle of playing when I heard someone's footsteps. I turned around to see the back of a boy entering the living room. I guessed he was Cecilia's stepbrother. We could hear the voice of a movie playing coming from the living room, so I figured he might be watching it with his father. About an hour later, as the movie finished, we heard the loud voices of arguments coming from the room. "You believe what you want." It was the boy's voice, and as he left the room, I turned to see his face, and I recognized it in an instant. It was Porter. No wonder Cecilia looked so familiar to me. He climbed the stairs and went to his room. His father followed him with an angry expression on his face, and then he started banging on the door and shouting, "Open up! Open up!" The three of us quietly went to see what was going on, and we saw his father knocking a hole in the door in anger. I could see that his hands were bloody and swollen, and could Porter through that hole, but I guess neither his father nor Porter cared, and that was terrifying to me. Kirby had started to cry from the horrifying scene playing in front of us, and Cecilia looked distraught, but she didn't cry. I guess she must have been used to this. The two of them didn't care about the terrified children looking at them. Porter's father kept working on the hole he was punching until it was big enough for him to unlock the door from the inside. And as he did, he smiled so widely that his teeth showed. That was when we heard our mom entering the house, and Cecilia's mom rushing as she heard the crying sound. "What the hell do you think you are doing in front of the kids?" she roared, pulling her husband away and giving a warning look to Porter. She apologized to our mom multiple times for whatever happened in the house, and her mom told her that it was okay. But I knew that she was just as scared as the rest of us. Her expression told us that she was relieved that we just got out of there in time. As Mom was taking us away with the promising look on her face that she would never bring us back, I saw Porter looking at us from the window with the same cold, dead look on his face that he always had. Thinking about his father, I now understood why he was the way he was. I remember being the only child not getting disgusted by the frog that was being cut down at the table. There was nothing that flinched me. I was already doing all the intricate cutting and chopping of the dead animal parts myself on the table. The frogs were nothing compared to the animals and reptiles I was cutting by the surgical blades of my father. He was a surgeon, and it was something that was passed on to me like a gift. I was never surprised by anything gory that people were usually surprised by. I was 5 when my father took me to watch my very first surgery. It was a neurosurgery, and I saw that my father was doing the intricate surgery very calmly, and he was really good at it, and his hand never shook. My father told me that if I have to become a great surgeon, I have to be like him. Never flinch, never to get disgusted by anything, and always be straight with my emotion. Never to react to situations, just assess them carefully, and then take action. Whatever logical and most rational decision it was. So when the time came for me to dissect a frog in school, I was already ahead from every other kid, and I never flinched and was not at all scared by it. While the kids in my class were fainting, but I wasn't. I was fascinated by it on a whole nother level that people in my class did not know about. I was acing all my sciences, but I was failing on connecting with other students and limited to only the subjects. Extra activities were just distractions that I was not interested in, so I stayed close to things that I was doing. With no friends and no social life, I was able to focus on the surgery. I was killing animals to inspect them. I was curious and anxious most of the time, and this calmed me down. Dogs, cats, birds, squirrels, I had operated on most of the animals. My father knew what I was doing, and he never hesitated but helped me with everything. I wasn't sure about animals anymore.
and I knew I had to move on up to operate on humans. I was 13, and I was ready to operate on humans, but my father said it would be reckless, so instead he told me to operate on all the bodies in the mortuary of his hospital, the bodies that were not claimed by anyone. He arranged it for me, and for months I would do it. I was never squeamish and never hesitated for once with it. For months I operated on those bodies, cutting them open, learning about them and observing them. And then months in it, I was all bored. There was no real ailment that I was curing or no breakthrough that I was doing. So it all started being bored and ridiculous for me. And I needed more from all of it. I needed a real patient. And I went with this query to my father, who said that I was out of my mind to even think about that. He told me that his license could be seized for doing something like that, and even be imprisoned for it. And moreover, he said that I was not rational enough to operate a living human being, and that my knowledge to such things was very limited. I knew it wasn't true. Moreover, I knew I was better than him, and somehow he knew it. It was something that I really wanted, and there was no way going around, and there was no denying that fact. I had to give in to the urge of operating on a living man, and for that, I had to find a man who was suffering from something now. This would possibly something out of my hand, since anyone in the right mind would not really look forward to getting operated from a child, so I had to wait a while for it. I turned 15 and looked like I was 17 or 18, and I somehow knew that it was the right time to indulge in my urge to operate on someone living, and there was no way still a sane man would indulge in such. So I turned to the forgotten people and roamed the streets looking for a homeless man as my subject of my surgery, and searching for around a month, I finally found the best subject. A brain-dead man that was lying on the front porch of the RV of a family that were too poor to take care of that man, and I paid them $100 for the man, and then along with the one friend who I gave $100 for keeping their mouth shut, bribed him into helping me out. We brought him back to my lab in the garage where I operated on every animal. All my apparatus were ready and be used and sanitized. Then told my friend to get away from the lab and not tell anyone about anything that I was doing in there. I picked up the surgical knife and started operating on the man. I opened up his brain. There was no modern equipment that I had. I was working with the knives and scalpel and all that. I had no idea of the medical records of the man, and I was clueless about the diagnosis. But I knew from the moment I opened the brain, I have a very little time to figure out the problem with him. And I opened and looked and looked and looked for the tiniest of details and tiniest of patches that I can find in that brain. And then after about a minute, I found the cysts and tumors clogging up the motor functions of the man. The man wasn't brain dead. There was blockage in the motor functions. I read about it in my books. I operated on him and started operating and went on to operate on him for hours. It was a 4-hour surgery. It took me around 4 hours to do it completely and stitch him back up. He was sedated and hopefully stable, and I just waited for him. And then I realized my father was watching the surgery and never really disturbed me. And I remember he was pissed, and he was shouting at the top of his lungs, calling me reckless, fool, and wannabe. And then, as he was shouting, the man opened up his eyes. The guy was awake, and it was done. He was awake, and he saw that he could easily move now. My father looked at me with awe and said, "Do you see what you have done? That man knows everything. Do you even know that he can testify against us and this all could go away and stop?" I looked at him and said, "I just wanted to show you that I can do it. I am more capable than any surgeon." As I said it, I got back to the man, sedated him, opened him up, and then with just a snip, made him the brain-dead body he was earlier. I remember the horror in my father's eyes, as if he was trying to tell me, and he did. He said, "You might be a genius, but you are a sociopath." I smiled, because genius is the only thing I heard.
I used to live with the biggest idiot on the face of the earth. Hector was this 6-foot Afro-Latino dude from New Jersey who had 2 distinct modes of being. Either he was a tornado of anger, or he was manically laughing at something. Rarely was there any in between. When you caught him in his laughing mood, he was tolerable at best, but catch him in one of his angry moods and he was totally unbearable. He was a roadie for some post-hardcore band that toured up and down the East Coast a bunch, which was one of the few good things about being his roommate. The fact that he spent weeks away at a time from the apartment but still paid rent. But whenever he was home, well, here's an example. It's July in East Harlem. I have the windows open. Latin brass band music is flowing through the afternoon air from some other open window, and I'm sipping Southern Peach lemonade like life is good. Out of nowhere, Hector bursts into the apartment, covered in brick dust like, "I need bricks, bro. You got bricks?" I just started driving Uber while trying to get my stand-up career up and running, so no, I didn't have any bricks. And even if I did, I wouldn't have been sharing them with Hector. And suddenly he's like, "There's bricks on the roof." And as he runs out of the apartment and towards the stairwell of the building, I hear these kids shouting from outside the window. Then I look out to see this group of kids, like 11-year-old kids, all shouting stuff in Spanish at our building. They see me, start flipping me off and whatnot before they suddenly scatter in all directions. Then bam, a brick lands right in the spot where they were before they scattered. See, that's the type of guy Hector was. He could go out for a pack of rips and find himself in a brick fight with a bunch of Puerto Rican kids on the way back. Never in my life have I ever had a fight with a preteen, let alone one involving projectiles. But around Hector, that stuff was like a daily occurrence. So come that October, Hector is headed out on some big Halloween tour with one of his bands, and he tells me he won't be back till the second week of November. That meant I'd have to cover half of the rent until then, something I'd have to borrow money to do. This causes a big fight, and for the first time since I moved in, I thought Hector might actually hit me. And being the kind of guy that he was, I knew for a fact that if it came to violence, he wouldn't just stop at one punch. So when the time came for him to go on tour, the mood in the apartment isn't just at its low point. I'm legit scared for my physical safety. He leaves, I'm looking for a new apartment, and life is not so good anymore. So a few nights later, the night before Halloween actually, I'm sitting in the little kitchen area, eating arepas and looking for other apartments. Someone buzzes the apartment, so I go to see who it is. This is back when we had intercoms, but they sucked and barely worked half the time, so when I hear some guy with an accent says something like, "I need an apartment number 3, but the buzzer's not working," I just buzz the guy in without a second thought. New York is a city built on takeout, delivery, and street food, so I'm hardly going to be all suspicious over a delivery driver. But I should have been, and I almost paid with my life for it. Those guys busted our front door open like it was nothing, just smashed the lock right through with a sledgehammer. I actually thought it was the cops at first because they just piled in, guns drawn, shouting, "Get on the floor, get down." But then the way that they were talking to each other once I was lying face down on the linoleum, that clued me into the fact that they were just stick-up guys. But what were they doing in my apartment? My first thought was, Jesus Christ, Hector, whose toes did you step on now? But before I can wonder anymore, one of the guys starts asking me, "Where is it? Where is it?" I'm like, "Where's what?" But that just makes them mad. I get this flurry of kicks that have me balled up in the fetal position, then they ask me again. I can't tell them anything else, so I just say, I don't know what you're talking about. There's $20 in my wallet, that's all I got on me." The offer of $20 just offended them, and I get more kicks before they start tossing the apartment like they're looking for something. And when I say tossing, I really do mean trashing. They're deliberately breaking stuff, pulling drawers all the way out and then throwing them at other stuff. It was just destruction in every sense of the word, and it was around then that I got a look at a couple of the guys. They're all masked up or have stuff over their faces. They're wearing all black, gloves, and the works. They were professional stick-up guys, probably robbed drug dealers for a living, but Hector wasn't dealing. I mean, I think I'd have noticed at some point. I saw a lot of broken guitars and amplifiers around the apartment, but not too many piles of coke or money. Then right as I'm about to think it, one of the guys comes out with it. "You sure this is the right place, man?" I don't know. Homie told me he keeps it behind the bathtub sometimes. But these people only got a shower in there." I feel this wave of relief washing over me. They got the wrong place, so they're gonna just walk out, right? Maybe take my phone so I can't call the cops. So, like I said, I told them my phone was on the table, next to my food, and that I wouldn't call the cops if they just left. Cuck move, maybe, but it's amazing how zen you get about material possessions when you see a Glock in someone's hand. The Stickup Guys kind of pause and look at each other. Then right as I think they're about to just leave, one of them says, "I think you see my face, man, when we were breaking in. He's gotta go." One of them has the gun, and the guy who wants me dead starts reaching to take it off the guy who has it, but the guy who has it doesn't want to give it up. That was my cue to soil myself and start begging for my life. It wasn't my proudest moment, and peeing my pants was by no means metaphorical, but it is what it is looking back. They're arguing over shooting me. I'm begging for my life. It's just chaos and them shouting in there, and I'm amazed no one had called the cops already. But then boom, the front entrance of the apartment building slams shut, and I can hear a very familiar voice coming up the stairs. I'm not even going to type out what Hector was saying. I'd be canceled and deleted from the internet within seconds after posting, but let's just say someone had canceled their tour 3 days in, and he was livid about it, going on calling them every name under the sun, ranting and raving as he pounded his way up the stairs, and in the apartment, both me and the Stickup Guys are about frozen in anticipation. Then right as Hector is about to come into the apartment, he says something like, "Hey, I got your money, you whiny little baby. What the The guy with the gun aims it at Hector as he walks in, looking around at the pure destruction that greeted him. "Who are you people?" he screamed. "Who are you?" the guy with the gun screamed back. Hector is just gone by this point, foaming at the mouth, looking like he's got one of his eyeballs about to pop when he comes back. "I live here!" Then, I swear to God, I watch as Hector basically turns into a drunk, slightly overweight Jason Bourne. He swings his backpack off his shoulder and just launches it at the shooter. He knocks the guy slightly off balance, messes up his aim, but by the time he can rearrange himself, Hector football tackles this guy onto the carpet and just starts wailing on him. The 2 other guys then jump in, and I'm thinking, oh Jesus God, someone's about to get shot. When out of nowhere, Hector comes up and is just windmailing punches at both guys, holding his own until he goes down again. Then almost immediately, both guys start backing up, hands in the air, and there's Hector, holding the gun he'd almost just been shot with, telling both the guys to back up. His face is bleeding. He's totally gassed, but there he is, having just won a freaking fistfight with 3 guys, one of them armed. He then sits on the KO'd shooter's back, tells the other guys to get out of his apartment, and tells me to dial 911. And only when the cops show up to arrest the guy he'd managed to detain did he realize he'd been stabbed in the shoulder. That night, as he got stitched up at the hospital, I sifted through all the broken and non-broken stuff, swept up all the broken glass and ceramics, and generally tried to put the apartment back in order. He got back at around 1 a.m., still drunk after the doctor told him, "Do not drink on these painkillers," and immediately started complaining about the break-in. I just carried on cleaning up, stopping only briefly to say something deeply heartfelt. "Hector, dude, I just wanted to say I think you might have saved my life today, dude, and I just wanted to say thank you." I felt my throat kind of tighten as I said it, very similar to the way it's doing now as I'm typing this, remembering. Hector looked up at me, with this look in his eyes that almost made it look like I'd gotten through to him, until he replied with, "Whatever, You could have jumped in at any time. I didn't mind. I knew Hector well enough by that point to know he wasn't exactly in touch with his feelings. But as he immediately sought to leave the room due to the uncomfortable amount of emotion in the air, he turned and said, "Did you see the look on those guys' faces, though? It's hilarious, dude." And he just walked off to his bedroom, laughing that evil toddler laugh that makes my skin crawl, even today. You see, for just over a year I shared an apartment with the biggest idiot on the face of the earth. And I owe that idiot my life. Please, New York, don't ever change.